With Stephanie White under fire by Fever fans, she blasted her team after the squad's loss to the Golden State Valkyries, which was a rough watch, no question about
The Indiana Fever just got steamrolled by the Golden State Valkyries, and the fan base is already lighting torches for Stephanie White. Caitlin Clark came back from injury, hoping to lift her team, only to stand helpless as everything crumbled around her. The coaching calls felt off. The energy was nowhere to be found. And now everyone's asking the same haunting question. Is this rock bottom? Is Stephanie White still the right leader for this squad? Or has Indiana reached its breaking point? Drop your thoughts in the comments.
Steph, they were coming in here talking about lack of focus, lack of knowing the game plan. How do you summarize kind of what you saw out there?
No, I was disappointed because I felt like there was a lack of competitive fire. With the exception of about 2 5-minute spurts, our attention to detail was poor. I'm not sure if it's not knowing the game plan as much as, because if it's not knowing the game plan, then that's a whole other conversation, as much as not executing the game plan. Our attention to detail.
Well, the Indiana Fever just delivered one of the season's most heartbreaking letdowns. And honestly, no one's even shocked anymore. They got completely outclassed by the Golden State Valkyries in a game that felt like a slow, painful unraveling. And the person squarely in the crosshairs? Stephanie White, catching all the fire from a fan base that's tired of watching the same disappointment play out. Let's just say it, this wasn't some regular loss. It was a full-on dismantling. The Fever managed just 31% from the field and a cringeworthy 22% from deep. You can't win shooting like that unless your defense is vintage 2004 Pistons. And spoiler alert, it wasn't even close.
Start with you. Just how did it first of all feel to be out there, and second of all, what do you think the offense was just so disjointed here today?
It felt good to be out there. I thought we started really well. I thought we were competitive. I thought we played with energy in the first 5 minutes, and then when they kind of went on their first run, it kind of deflated us a little bit, which I'm not really sure why, but the offense, I think, for us, like, it starts on defense, and we, struggled, scouting report wise, we struggled personnel, we struggled to do what the coaches asked of us, and then, overall, like, we just played with more energy and effort, and, those are the things that just can't happen. So, it's every single person on our team, and, nobody played well today.
And here's the part that really stings. Caitlin Clark was finally back from injury, and this is what we got. A showing so rough, it had people wondering if the team was actually better without her. That's wild to even suggest, especially for someone meant to be the face of the franchise. But then it gets even more curious. Stephanie White made the call to start Aria McDonald at point guard instead of sticking with the usual crew. Clark's first game back, and White decided it was the perfect time to test out new lineups. From the opening tip, the lack of chemistry was obvious. Clark and McDonald had 0 reps together, and it showed. The whole thing felt more like a random pickup game at your local YMCA than a professional matchup.
Undisciplined. I felt like our energy and our competitive fire was not there, and that's disappointing.
Why do you think you had some of these inconsistencies when it comes to focus and engagement, things like that?
I'd say discipline more so than focus. I think this is a group that focuses, but you can focus, and then you have to be able to go out and be disciplined enough to execute it, right? I'm not sure. We're as coaches, that's our job to figure it out. Why it is. You've seen it in spurts, you've seen it in moments, you've seen it with certain lineups. So finding those lineups that we've seen it with consistently, and maybe keeping those together. There's always going to be adjustments when you're working people.
The worst part about this whole mess, it didn't have to happen. This wasn't some juggernaut they faced. The Valkyries are a tough, disciplined team that sticks to their plan and plays with heart. But when you show up lifeless, ignore the hustle plays, and can't buy a bucket, you're basically begging to get run off the floor. And that's exactly how it went down. Stephanie White's post-game comments said a lot, too. She mentioned a lack of fire and focus, which is just coach code for, my players didn't bring it. that either points to a team that's tuning her out or a coach who's lost the locker room. No matter how you spin it, it's a bad look.
The competitiveness and the attention to detail, and willingness to play with multiple levels of effort. Prime examples when we get defensive stops, but then they get multiple offensive rebounds. That's 1-2. That's competitive fire, and that's unacceptable.
The defensive effort, honestly, it was just sad. The Valkyries kept crashing the glass, grabbing offensive rebound after offensive rebound, while the Fever stood frozen like spectators. You can't excuse that, especially not when your star is finally back in the lineup. And what makes it all more frustrating is this team has shown flashes. They took down the New York Liberty. They beat the Minnesota Lynx in the Commissioner's Cup. We've seen them look sharp, inspired, and then they come out with a mess like this. It really makes you wonder, do they just not have the mental grit to stay consistent? And then there's the Caitlin Clark factor, which only complicates things. She's coming off both a quad and groin injury. So sure, some rust is expected, but White's minute management, that raised eyebrows. Clark was benched during critical stretches, and each time the lead slipped right through their fingers. She went to the bench, and White's reasoning for starting McDonald. She said she wanted 2 primary ball handlers on the floor. Sounds good on paper, but in reality, it was a mess. The offense had no rhythm, no identity. Clark barely touched the ball. And for a player of her talent, that's just unacceptable. But let's be real, the shooting struggles weren't just on one person. Kelsey Mitchell shot 3 of 13. Aaliyah Boston, just 2, 4, 8. And Sophie Cunningham's season-long slump kept dragging on. When your entire starting 5 is ice cold, it's not just bad luck, it feels like something deeper. And with the way this team's been up and down all year, it's hard not to think it's a system issue. But here's the kicker. The Valkyries didn't even light it up. They shot just 37% and turned the ball over 16 times. This wasn't some dominant performance, it was just less messy. This wasn't some masterclass from Golden State. The Fever beat themselves with sloppy execution and even worse energy, and that's what makes it so hard to stomach. Sure, the scheduling didn't help. A noon tip-off on a weekday isn't ideal, but these are pros, they're supposed to adjust. The way they came out looking like they'd rather be anywhere else, that speaks more to mindset than to the clock. And then there's Stephanie White's game plan, which absolutely needs a closer look. The missing pick and roll between Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston, hard to ignore. That play has been a go-to all season, and suddenly it vanished. In its place, stagnant possessions, isolation plays that led nowhere. And then the bench got exposed, too, because when your starters are flatlining, you need your bench to show up when the starters can't. But with players like Lexi Hull shooting just 2 of 7, the second unit brought zero spark. And part of that blame goes to the coaching staff for failing to build real depth over the course of the season. What makes it all the more frustrating is that this team should be good. Clark is a once-in-a-generation player. Boston's a versatile big who can space the floor. Mitchell's a proven scorer. But somehow, they still can't make it all click. And that falls on the coaching to figure out. Fans haven't held back either. And honestly, who can blame them? They're paying good money to watch this team and getting stuck with games like this. The noise around Stephanie White's job is only getting louder. And after a game like that, it's tough to push back on it. But here's the truth. Firing a coach mid-season rarely changes everything. Because the real problems, they run deeper. From roster design to locker room chemistry. This isn't just about one person that they've been inconsistent all season. And there's this lingering sense of disconnect between what the coach is asking for and what the players actually deliver. The timing of Clark's return couldn't have been worse either. Coming back from injury into a game like this, that's the kind of night that drains a player, especially one expected to carry the franchise. She needed a moment to rebuild her rhythm, her confidence. Instead, she got a front row seat to just how exasperating this team can be. Still, credit where it's due. The Valkyries came to play. They were physical, they chased down every loose ball, and they executed their plan to perfection. Natalie Nakasi has that squad locked in, and it showed. They saw exactly where the Fever were vulnerable, and they went after it relentlessly. The stats paint the full picture. Indiana got crushed on the boards, 47-36. They gave up 16 offensive rebounds, handing Golden State second and third chances all game. And those are effort stats, the ones that reveal who wanted it more. And it wasn't the Fever. Clark's individual performance wasn't awful, all things considered. She shot for 12. Not ideal, but for someone just coming off injury, and clearly not in full game shape, it was understandable. The real concern? How the team looked with her on the court versus when she was off. And once again, the strategic calls from White raised eyebrows. Starting McDonald may have made sense in theory, but it was obvious early that the combo just wasn't clicking. A good coach adjusts when the plan falls apart. But White, she stayed locked into hers no matter what. Defensively, the game plan was a mess. The Valkyries trapped Clark right at half court, and there was no real counter. No screens to get her space, no smart ball rotation to punish Golden State for doubling. It's basketball 101. These are the simple things, the building blocks of good offense. And somehow, this team keeps forgetting the basics, that it's something they just keep struggling with. The defensive scheme was a glaring issue. The Valkyries trapped Clark at half court, over and over, and nothing changed. No screens to help her break free. No ball movement to punish the defense for overcommitting. These are the fundamentals of basketball, and somehow this team can't seem to get them right. But the most alarming part? The lack of effort. In the NBA, you might survive an off-shooting night if you're playing hard and locking in. But in the WNBA, where the talent is tightly packed, effort and precision matter even more. And the Fever had neither. The post-game reactions made that clear. White spoke about discipline and the fire to compete. Clark admitted nobody really stepped up. That kind of honesty says a lot. But even still, it doesn't change the reality of what we all just watched. But the fact is, it happened, and the road ahead doesn't offer any relief. The Fever are staring down a brutal stretch, and if they don't fix things fast, this season could slip through their fingers. They're still clinging to a playoff spot, but just barely. And nights like this won't keep them in the race. You have to imagine the front office is taking a hard look after that performance. They've poured resources into this roster, brought in a new coach, and built everything around Clark. But if things don't turn around soon, decisions will have to be made. That's just how it goes in pro sports. What makes it all so maddening is that this team can hang with the best when they're locked in. That Commissioner's Cup win over Minnesota proved it. But consistency? That's been their Achilles heel all year. And games like this are exactly why. The fans, they deserve so much more. They've stayed loyal, stuck with the team through the lows, and they keep showing up. They're hoping to see growth, progress. But instead, they keep getting performances that make them wonder if this group will ever truly click. Looking ahead, the Fever have a shot at redemption. They face Atlanta on Friday, a game that should be winnable if they show up with the right energy. But after what we just witnessed against Golden State, nothing feels guaranteed. The Stephanie White experiment is hitting a breaking point. She was hired to be the coach who could unlock this roster's full potential. But so far, the results? All over the place. If things don't turn around fast, her seat's going to get very warm. And then there's the Caitlin Clark factor, a whole other layer of pressure. She's the face of women's basketball right now. This entire franchise is built around her. But if the coaching staff can't figure out how to use her, and if they can't use her effectively, what's the point? She needs to be set up to thrive. And right now, that's not happening nearly enough. This loss to the Valkyries wasn't just a disappointment. It felt like a jolt to the system. A wake-up call. The Fever can't keep showing up like this and expect to chase anything meaningful. Something has to give, whether it's a tactical shift, roster tweaks, or bigger picture changes from the top down. The status quo won't cut it. This team simply has too much talent to be this unpredictable. Clark is a once-in-a-generation star. Boston is a polished big with range. Mitchell can fill it up. But raw talent doesn't mean much if you can't execute, and that's where coaching matters most. And right now, the coaching isn't delivering. So let's talk about what's right in front of us, the system. White's motion offense may look good on paper, but it doesn't suit Clark's game. Everyone can see it, except somehow the coaching staff. Clark is at her best with the ball in her hands, controlling tempo, making reads. But instead, she's stuck running around screens, playing off-ball, and that approach, it's neutralizing her best qualities. The philosophical divide between coach and star is becoming more obvious with every game. White wants constant ball movement and shared decision-making, but Clark thrives when she's the one steering the ship. Those clashing visions are creating hesitation, breakdowns, and a level of inconsistency that's dragging the whole team down. And then there's the minute management. In this game, it was just head-scratching. Clark sat during key moments when the team desperately needed direction. The offense flatlined without her. If you're going to center your entire identity around one player, then you have to lean on that player when it matters. But the lack of readiness was obvious from the jump. The Fever looked like a team that hadn't watched a second of film on Golden State's aggressive defense. That's coaching 101. You've got to prepare your team for the pressure they'll face. And on this night, White simply didn't. The preparation just wasn't there. And the substitution patterns? They made no sense. Players who were rolling got pulled, while others who were clearly struggling stayed in. It felt like White was coaching from a script she wrote before tip-off, ignoring the actual flow of the game. Timeout management was just as confusing. She let Golden State rattle off big runs without stopping play to regroup. By the time she finally called one, the damage was done. The confidence? Gone. And on defense, it was chaos. The rotations were a mess. Guys were out of position, switches were blown, help never came, no communication, no structure. That's basic stuff. That's what every pro team should have locked in. But the Fever looked like strangers out there. Offensively, it wasn't any better. The sets were stale, easy to read, and nothing adjusted when the first look didn't work. There was no spark, no adaptability, just a system stuck in neutral. Once the first option was taken away, everything stalled. Good coaches build multiple reads into their plays, but White's sets seemed to have just one. And when that got shut down, the possession collapsed. The player development under her watch has also been troubling. Aside from Clark, who came in as an elite talent, who on this roster has actually grown? Boston looks like she's taken a step back. Mitchell's become unpredictable. And the role players? There's been no noticeable progress. But the real issue isn't just the X's and O's. It's deeper than that. The body language during this game said everything. Players looked frustrated with each other, with the coaching, and with the system they're being forced to run. That's not just a strategy issue, it's a culture issue. And that starts at the top. Even the pregame prep felt off. From the very first possession, the Fever looked completely unready for the pressure Golden State brought. Golden State's physicality and aggressive defense, the Fever looked stunned by it. A good coach would have prepared for that kind of pressure, but White seemed blindsided. Whatever halftime adjustments were made, if any, had no real effect. The same issues that haunted them early just kept showing up, which tells you one of two things. Either White didn't see the problems, or she couldn't clearly communicate how to fix them. The fourth quarter was where it really fell apart. This is where top coaches step up, adjusting rotations, drawing up smart plays. But White missed on both. The game was still within reach, and it just slipped away. The collapse was complete. And after the game, the disconnect was obvious. White's words didn't match what we saw. She talked about wanting two ball handlers out there. But what we watched, it didn't look anything like that. What we saw on the floor didn't reflect what she described. And that points to one of two things, either poor communication or poor execution. Fans have every right to be frustrated now. They've watched this team stumble for months, and the same problems just keep showing up with no real answers in sight. Patience is wearing thin, and honestly, who could blame them? Even